All right. Well, enough said. Let's get started on the webinar today. Thanks for joining in. If this is your first time joining the Nerdy Birdy, this is a webinar series where we're showing you start to finish examples of successful integrations with our Synthesize vendors and channel partners. We all know it's one thing to get an integration or a PSA off the ground. It's quite another to see it take flight. Yes, we're going to throw out a lot of bird puns today. We're featuring guest speakers on the vendor side, and they're sharing their integration experience with us and what it's been like to work within Synthesize. That's right. That means that what went well, what went less well. After all, every flight hits a little turbulence now and then. So join us on the third Tuesday of every month as we explore vendor and PSA integrations from every angle so you can realize the full potential. Now, today, we're taking a deep dive into billing best practices and the significance of breaking out your service bundles or packages. Now, before we get started here, I just want to take some time just to review our agenda, and then we'll just follow that by a few little introductions. Followed that by the seven-figure MSP philosophy. Now, without spilling too many beans, again, we don't want Chris to share all of his trade secrets because, again, you can just go to sevenfiguremsp.com and get your 5-minute demo. But again, we're just going to touch on that, and then we're going to roll into the significance of breaking out packages, and we're going to have some ad hoc conversations about this, the importance of breaking out your packages, again, adhering to billing best practices, and we'll talk about that in a second here. And then followed that, I'm going to take control of the screen here, and I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty of contract and invoice configurations. Because again, it's one thing breaking those out within your client contracts within your PSA, but it's another in just showcasing that on your invoice. Because again, we don't want to muddy the waters and line item everything out. We want to simplify that process, and this really rolls into that seven-figure philosophy in itself. And again, we're going to have some takeaways followed by some Q&A, and we'll wrap things up at the top of the hour here. So without further ado, myself, the Nerdy Birdy, Bryan Chapman. Yes, that's me in a spacesuit, but I am manager of partner success here at Gradient MSP. I am fully dedicated to helping you as an MSP reach new heights with the Synthesize platform. So again, I get the privilege of working with MSPs like yourself each and every day, and streamline billing practices and whatnot. So I am fortunate. I've worked at an MSP previous to Gradient for 6+ years. I empathize with you. I sympathize with everything that you go on in a monthly basis when it comes to that invoice drudgery. So I get it. Now, on to the next. Let's meet the flockers, shall we? Colin Knox, founder and CEO of Gradient MSP, the flock father. How's it going, Colin?
Going good. It's going good. Apparently, I look way better in an astronaut outfit than I do in real life, so it's good. I have better cheekbones, I think.
Looks like some AI stuff to me.
Right? I don't know. I think so. There's some wizardry going on. No, super happy to be here. Super happy that we got good friend Chris joining us today. I don't know. I think maybe we should have had him spill all the beans, because then we could just lock.
I can spill whatever beans you guys want,
and we'll just charge for access to it. It's repeatable, it's scalable, it's build it once and let her go. No, but yeah, super happy to be here. I know this one's a bit of a unique Nerdy Birdy compared to the super deep technical nitty-gritty that you always get into, and Seven Figure's not an integration partner of ours by any means, but we've done a lot of work with them over the last year, and we've worked with a ton of their partners and members. You call them partners, you call them members, Chris?
Yeah, either one. Just kind of depends on what country you're
from. Doesn't care, just call them. But yeah, spent a lot of time working with them and thought, this would be a really good one for you to share some of your wisdom through and down around how you're helping all of these MSPs grow into seven-figure MSPs and find success, while still being able to leverage a solution like what Gradient offers in reconciliation and capturing things, but making sure that the business is operating profitably with an understanding of that cost up stuff. So unique episode for sure, but super happy to be here, and yeah, super excited to welcome and introduce this flocker, my buddy Chris Weiser, the founder and CEO of Seven Figure MSP. We've been on a few panels. We've shared a few bevies over the years, and yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, Chris.
We go back a long way now, don't we? We're getting old, buddy.
We
Like,
are.
That's the problem. I remember sitting, I think the first panel we were ever on was at a CompTIA channel event, and we just kind of connected from there. And you were an owner of an MSP back then. I was an owner of an MSP back then. So all three of us former MSP guys. I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin market, started in 2005, sold that MSP, just like Colin, you sold yours. Bryan, I don't know if you sold one as well, but Colin and I did. Sold mine in 2015. And one of the things that I kind of sought out to what's a weak point that MSPs have, as I kind of came out of that and I saw some of the things that we did, and it took me about a year to kind of put my nose to the ground and feel what's there. And sales and profitability, you mentioned a very important part on that, because there's a lot of people that come to me and say, I can close all day long. Well, if you're the cheapest guy in the block, any running dummy, no offense, guys, any running dummy can close deals. But are you closing deals at the proper profitability, best in class number? A lot of people talk to me. Many of you that are watching either live or on the recording have heard my polarization kind of stuff that we talk about, getting to $300 a seat. And we get to that number because it's about looking at what your costs are and putting an 80% margin on top of it. So we want you at that 80% or better, best in class margins, whereas most MSPs are running very, very low, very thin, and they're using price as a negotiating tactic. And that should, now the huge thing, we'll get into this a little bit as we go. The huge thing that we have now is we're in the best time this industry has. We've been here a long time, all three of us. Best time this industry's ever seen, because we're finally in that place where the governments, the insurance companies, legislation, all this is basically saying, Mr. MSP client, you have to have a full stack. You have to put this in play. We can finally sit here and say, what's the ROI on IT and cybersecurity coverage? Hopefully zero. Hopefully I never have to recover you. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into today, but that's the core of what we do, is we help the MSP look at profitability. And our goal within the first 6 to 12 months in my coaching program is to double your current MRR. And we do it about 90% of the time.
Well, and you know, you did a post, was it today? Was it last night? You did a post on one of the social media things, but about how scalable is your,
that was yesterday. That was last night.
How dependent is your business on you? And you guys have done awesome work on helping MSPs find scale in that repeatable sales process that brings people in and grows their business. And where I really love the partnership and in combination between Gradient and you guys is you're helping them scale on the growth of the business that way. We help them scale by eliminating all that back office bullshit that they have to deal with every month because of how much they're selling, right? And how much their business is growing. So
it's kind of funny how billing takes it back, even though you know that the money's out there. The amount of MSPs that I talk to that are like, oh, I didn't bill at all this month, I have to spend some time. What are you doing? Like, you should be focused. Like, and it's hard because I know you guys started as techs and you like being techs, and it gets very easy to get lost in MSP. That's what I call it. But eventually at some point, you're going to be in the MSP wheel of death, which is cash flow, no money, working on everything myself. And then you just go around in this giant circle where you are being, and I did a post, Colin, you mentioned the post. I did a post about a month ago that my social media manager and I kind of set up, and you heard me mention polarization earlier. We had this whole thing, which was, are you building yourself a shitty business or shitty job, really? And not a huge fan of the language on it, but it's more a matter of, you think about what a great job is in your brain, like what's a great job? And then you think about the job that you potentially have built yourself as a business owner. And a lot of times it doesn't line up with that. You built yourself a crappy, terrible job. Billing and cash flow starts that process of being a good job.
Yeah. So that's like an excellent segue into the 7-figure MSP, the philosophy. And again, I don't want you to spill all the beans and give all the trade secrets, but it's not necessarily a secret, right? Like how do you position yourself and your services so you can charge upwards of $300 per seat and attain those 80+% margins?
Yeah. So much of it is about actually having a sales process. And, Bryan, you're right. I'll tell you, everybody that's watching, there is no trade secrets. It's having a sales process. It's having discipline. It's focusing on sales first versus what do most MSPs do? They focus on tech first. And there's this kind of misnomer that I'm going to charge a good profitability margin. That makes me a bad MSP, or that makes me, Colin, you've seen this in my big Facebook group. Like guys are like, I prefer to service my clients the right. I'm going to tell you what, if you service your clients the right way, which means charging them properly, you can actually, and you bill them properly, right? You're actually putting yourself in a way better place to service them properly, because MSPs now, and this is the other factor, and this is really how we do it. You are bound now, as we sit here, today is March 21st, 2023. We are sitting here where Canada, United States, Australia, the UK, we are bordering on being legally bound to service MSP clients. If you saw the White House cybersecurity initiative that got put out about 3 weeks ago, where they're starting to hold MSPs accountable for negligence, meaning you have a duty to your client to say, okay, Mr. Client, you need this stack. You need cyber, and it's got to start with cybersecurity all the way down. We don't care about help desk. We don't care about on-site labor, but if you could potentially put a tool in that could help stop some things or educate them, you're going to win. So every MSP is going to have to do this, no matter what, sometime in the next 12 months. We teach you how to do that with sales first, optimizing risk, showing the client that, and then forcing the client to make the decision, putting them in a place where it's like, okay, you have a heart condition. Do you want surgery or do you not care? Mr. Client, like I'm kind of paraphrasing and using an analogy there, but it's the same concept. You have all this cyber risk. You don't have MFA in your bank accounts. You don't have MFA anywhere. You're going to get social engineered. You're going to get hacked. How do you want to handle it? Holy cow, I didn't know. Okay, well, you got to make a decision because I'm doing my job. We teach you how to do that. And then when that risk is there and the client realizes the risk is there, you could say, okay, I can solve it for you, but it's going to cost more money because I have to put in all these tools. And that's the core of it, really.
And you're not selling tools, you're selling the solution, right? So this is where
selling the solution 100%.
And this is where from a billing perspective, from that operation side of things, this is where you certainly advocate for billing out comprehensive, all you can eat kind of contracts, right?
Realistically, now we're in a place where, and note, guys, if you go look at the cybersecurity insurance firms now, you look at the White House initiative, there's stuff coming from Canada literally right now that's happening. They are saying you need a stack, an all-inclusive stack. What tools you use, we don't care. How you get there, we don't care. How you build them, we don't care. We care that you put in the comprehensive solution and you communicate with them to let them know that they have a choice. Stop selling tools, start selling the solution. Exactly right.
I thought that was like, I for one, I'm a huge advocate of that, because working at MSP for 6+ years on the rev ops side of things, having to nickel and dime customers and have them reach out to you on a monthly basis, scrutinizing IT spend all the bloody time. And so there's almost like this lack of trust in that in itself. But when you don't go down, when you go down the path of creating these client exceptions, and you maybe you do line item everything out, again, you're scrutinizing those tools. Why are you using that, and why aren't we using this, et cetera, et cetera? We could save more here. Again, I really buy into the whole notion of selling a solution rather than the tool, because that's on you as an MSP. You are the managed service provider. So,
and the client realistically doesn't care how you get there until you bring it up to them and you're like, okay, here's how we get there. And then you're going to have nickel-dimey decision makers. You're going to have nickel-dimey money people. You're literally just giving them things to nitpick. So, and part of this also comes down to, we have a sales process. This is how we do it. If you don't like it, get the hell out of here. Like, some of it has to be that, but you're not going to have a sales. And I'm not saying be a jerk, for the record, but I'm saying walk in, be confident, know what you do, know how Colin, that's how you were in your MSP. That's how you are in Radiant. That's how I am. If you do things that way, you're going to have success.
Yeah.
And it's mind blowing. I have MSPs tell me all the time, I'll never get $300 in San Diego, $300 a seat. And a seat, for the record, is a human being with their devices. So like I have a laptop and a phone. Okay. That's my world right now. That's a seat. I'll never get that per month. We are selling that all over the world in every single first world market. We had a guy in North Perth, Australia that is doing $350 a seat per month all day long. If he can sell it in Perth, Australia, don't give me your excuses, right? Because it can happen anywhere. It's all about how you move it, how you present it, how you package it, and how you bill it.
And you want to get to your path to the quickest yes or the quickest no, right? The people that belabor and always try to turn a no into a yes over weeks and weeks and weeks and put all of their effort into that versus having a process, having a package that weeds out the people that don't have the budget, that weeds out the people that are never going to see the full value, or maybe you finally convince them to say yes, but they don't enjoy the price, they don't enjoy anything else, and it's the first thing they're going to cut. Find your path to those quick yeses, right? And you're going to weed out the lower quality prospects and clients by doing that too.
And here's the other thing on this, Colin. Just think about your existing client base and how many potential left on the table dollars you have, because we all started somewhere. Like I think back to the first sale I had, it was a $6,000 a month orthopedic clinic. That was 100+ users for the record. So I was just giving them a smoking deal. You have to modify that over time. You have to go back and have these conversations. Cybersecurity and the need for this stack and these legal changes in the States. We have this FTC safeguards that dropped about 2 months ago. That's going to go into effect in June. We have the new cybersecurity initiative. Every single day we have new hacks. You have all these opportunities to go back and talk to your existing clients. The average MSP is leaving 50% or more potential MRR on the table with your clients because you just didn't know how to sell right, or you weren't confident, or you didn't have a process, or we haven't even talked about the fact that your agreements that are sitting out there potentially have zero liability language in them for what happens when there's a breach. Everybody's having I stood in front of the room at IT Nation and I said, who in this room can prevent all hacks? 0 hands went up. But what do your clients think? Your clients think you got their back, right?
Yeah.
So you got to think about all this stuff, and it gives you a huge opportunity to go back, to resell, repackage, revisit, and then get them onto your single all-inclusive, single point of billing scenario.
Yeah, I mean, there's always an evolution with MSPs, going from break fix when you first start out to transitioning to like a per seat basis, now to comprehensive packages. But to play devil's advocate here is, the world where we know right now is largely consumption based. Everything from your Netflix and Disney Plus accounts to you name it, everything is subscription based. It's a per unit cost. Now, how does that fold in with the 7-figure philosophy? Like, this is where, of course, we talk in terms of per seat and achieving that $350 per seat, but that comprehensive package, like, just enlighten us some more as to why we should do that, despite, like, in our day-to-day lives, we were bombarded by all these subscriptions and all these seat charges.
Flexible.
Well, and most of what did you say, Colin?
Well, and all the flexible packaging that we have now, right? Like, who subscribes to cable anymore? But those who do, right, is you're picking your channels now that you want and don't want and stuff. But yeah,
to a point. But let's also understand. I have YouTube TV, for example. I have a package. It's one flat rate per month. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have granted, I can add some other things if I need to, but so much of this and those choices are consumer based. So not B2B based, business to consumer based. And I'm fine if you want to do some of that stuff in your retail computer shop. We have a couple of guys that I know. My friend Jason is in Central Kansas. He does that in his retail computer shop still that way. But his business clients are all one flat rate. The biggest thing I will say to that is think about business liability insurance, E&O insurance. It's all one flat rate. It's monthly. Granted, it's based on how much you have to protect. And that's where your matrix comes in. How much do you have to protect? Think about now, you as an MSP aren't thinking about how many devices am I protecting really anymore. It's what are the hackers after now? We're past the days of we're going to lock out your network and ransom you. I know it still happens once in a while, but what are the hackers doing? The number one thing right now, business email compromise, your Beck scam, which is what are they after? We're going to take your money. So out the window goes the whole, well, I'm too small to get hacked. If you're a one-person shop, you got 100 grand in the bank, more than likely, if you're your client, right? So what would you do, Mr. Client? And this is where the whole justification of it comes in. What would you do, Mr. Client, if you woke up tomorrow and half the cash in your bank account had been wired out, or you accidentally sent a $100,000 wire or a $50,000 wire to Russia or wherever? Because that's happening. We hear those every single day. Every one of you watching this hears of that every single day. And what would you do if that happened? And then you thought that it was covered by the bank, because they all think it's covered by the bank until they realize, holy crap, it's an international wire. There's no coverage. I have to have cybersecurity coverage. So my point is no longer, and granted, we're calculating internally. And if you guys, this is one of the things that we do. We're calculating internal costing of the clients, how we bill them based on per seat, how we charge them, not necessarily how we bill them. I put $300 per seat only it's because it's a number that MSPs are constantly using from other
It's
vendors.
digestible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a common thing. But you should be going to your client, and I started doing this in 2009 for the record. Here's what we determined your stuff is at your client site. It's going to cost this much per month, $3,200 a month or $2,600 a month. That includes all this stuff underneath it. We're not going to break it out. We will determine the cost just for simplicity. Honestly, most MSPs, Colin, you know this better than anyone. Most MSPs have no idea of what their costs are, especially when it comes to time tracking, right?
Yeah.
So early stages of working with our clients, we say, instead of sitting around for the next 6 months, figuring out what your costs are, because you don't even know what your stack is until you put at least 2 to 3 clients in, because you got to figure it all out. We're going to put you at what we've determined to be our standard 80% margin per seat price, which includes usually their phone and their PC, $300 a seat. It makes it easy. You go into a 10-user network with 3 servers or whatever, that's 13 seats times 300, boom, done. That fast we can calculate. And now, instead of worrying about all the crap and all these devices and all these things we're going to nickel dime, we're focused on, we're going to put this stack in. It's going to cost you X amount per month. And all we're doing now is we're saying, we can't stop all hacks, Mr. Client. We're going to do our best to limit the blast radius. We're going to do our best to control recover, and we're going to do our best to get your insurance claim paid. Because we know, everyone knows, it's gonna happen if you have humans and internet in the mix. Like, you can't stop it. Like, there's no way you can ultimately stop it if you you can't. So we have to be able to justify, because now the insurance companies are coming back and saying, prove to us you weren't negligent, Mr. Client. Prove to us your IT company wasn't negligent. So it all becomes now not about the devices, Bryan, to put a bow on your whole question. It's not about the devices and the nickel-dimey thing. It's about, we had to manage your risk the best we could. Mm-hmm. It's doing our best. Do we know the hurricane's coming? Do we know the tornadoes? We know it's coming. But if you sat there in your house and didn't board anything up and didn't evacuate anything, and you sat there and the hurricane and the flood still came, we're not going to pay your claim.
Yeah.
That's what shutters businesses, and that's what gets you negligent, because now negligence and risk management is what matters.
Right. Yeah, it's a long-winded question answer there, Chris, but yeah, totally.
I know, but I had to bring it all around because a lot of people.
He put a bow on it. He put a bow on it.
I put a bow on it. I just have to build the case, because the challenge is there's a lot of MSPs that, like, we talk to 50 a week.
Yeah.
And the battle we fight is, I'm going to be a crappy MSP if I don't do this antivirus or this.
Right.
It's not about that anymore, guys.
No.
It's about risk management now, because you talk about the tool, specifically the antivirus tool or the anti-spam tool or whatever, secondary threat tool. It becomes all about that. And then they think that you're Superman.
Mhm.
And it doesn't make you a bad IT guy if you can't prevent your client from getting hacked, because they're all getting hacked, man.
They're all susceptible to the same thing, right? So yeah, I totally agree to that. Now, as far as like the drawbacks of not breaking out your packages, now let's just talk about that for a second, just because, you know, obviously there's great benefit in having that comprehensive package. It really streamlines billing procedures and overall just scales that exponentially. But there are some potential drawbacks, and let's just talk about those, because Colin, jump in here too, is just overlooking potential significant gaps in your tech stack. So, you know, on average, Colin, like through Synthesize Insights, like how many vendors and services, subscriptions, licenses do MSPs offer?
Yeah. So out of the insight stuff that we did, excuse me, in December, when we dug into the data, the average MSP was reselling 17 different services across all of their clients. Now, not every client was taking every service, but there was that misunderstanding of what they are offering, what they're not. And I think the biggest thing that we saw was what the average usage across all clients was of those 17 services. I think averaged out at 5 or 6, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, there is stuff to talk to Chris's, you know, methodology and philosophy of, well, you just sell all of that stuff to all of your clients and you get mass adoption across. You know, I think one question I'd have for Chris on it that I've thought about and was always curious about is you get these new things that come up over time, and maybe he's going to cover this through the margin increase that they toss on everything. But, you know, if I come across and there's, I don't know, maybe Chat GPT is going to come out with some new freaking thing that I want to be able to package in and resell or whatever, who knows what it is, right? But some category that you're missing out on that you're not offering. How do you look at stacking that in without having to wait for the contract renewal, where, okay, now we're going to add in these things and now the price goes up to that? Because I think that's one of the biggest benefits I've seen in consumption stuff. And I know that's what Cisco and Microsoft and all these guys have converted over, is like, hey, if I add something new, I can now automatically push for upsell across all of my clients on.
Yeah, but also think about the fact that entire relationship with some of those bigger guys, it's all commoditized. How do they decide to sign Azure and AWS? It's usually, I mean, features may be a piece of it, but it's definitely price.
Yeah.
We're in a place now where we don't really want to be, I mean, you can control whether you want to be price focused, but here's what I'll say to that. Number one, my suggestion is an 80% margin on top of it, not a net margin. Net margin is after all your expenses. I know that that's a lot, but so it's a margin, 80% margin on top of it. And you should be having, and we also recommend that you start with a 3-year, 36-month agreement as your baseline. Now, there's always ways to move on this, but namely, when you are negotiating, oh, I want this cheaper. Okay, you can have it cheaper, longer term. Everybody knows that already. They do that with cars and houses and all these other things in their life, so they understand that. But you have the stuff set, or I want it shorter term. Okay, it's more money, simple. But adding annual price increases as a baseline to that 36-month agreement should be part of it. And that covers things like inflation, new tools costs, some of these other scenarios that you're talking about. For example, one of the things that we actively did, we all saw Microsoft Office increase all their pricing, or the Microsoft 365, whatever they call it now. We saw them increase their pricing as this year went on, or as last year went on. Our guys didn't really care because they had built-in contract upgrades. Because the second you go back to, and here's the other factor, how many MSPs are actually doing real quarterly business reviews? The ones that are doing, I'm going to say 8, there's probably less than 10% of overall MSPs that are doing QBRs, probably, right?
Well,
of the ones that are doing it, they're doing ticket reviews.
Yeah.
Very rarely are they doing an actual business technology review in some capacity. And almost never are they talking about, I need to make sure we look at this, and we need to look at this, and we need to look at contract upgrades. So it comes down to this nickel-dimey thing, back to where Bryan said, and it becomes a price point decision versus a risk management decision, which is where we're going.
Yeah,
So the
and I
should be
guess
built
like
into
how
the
many times are you watching what your base level cost is on all these things, right? Like,
Yeah. And
just
I
the-
want
the
to make this
invoice comes
clear
in,
too. I want to make
right?
this clear too, is like, this is really meant to just discuss around if you have those comprehensive packages
Yeah.
or you have bundles. And
Yeah,
again, it's more back end administrative. Like, am I breaking out all of my cost of goods sold?
yeah,
Because as long as we don't really care as what your invoice looks like, obviously if it's simplified, it makes things really easy. You're paying $5,000 for 10 users, and you break out all your cost of goods sold in your contract, and
Yeah.
you're relating those to general ledger accounts within your accounting package. Then all of a sudden, because your PSA, we're also adding in time and materials and your project management and all of these other contractuals. You have greater granularity into your profit margins per contract, per customer. So this is really, it's not necessarily the drawbacks of not breaking up packages. It's talking about like not breaking out cost of goods sold. So this
Yeah.
is where, like, again, so this is the significance of breaking those things out. So if you do deploy 3-year contract, 10 user minimum, or what have you, you should have all of your tool stack reconciled and audited on a monthly basis. So again, we're not, because at one end of the spectrum, you could have negative impacts on service delivery in the sense that you deploy, 5 EDR licenses, and you're all of a sudden you're uncompliant because you don't have 5 others. There's 5 other devices out there sitting somewhere that don't have that protection.
It comes down to a couple things, right? Like you hit on one. One is compliance with your contracts, and then the other is what you're actually making on your money, right? What's driving your money and what's pulling away from it, right? On the one hand, yeah, you're damn right. If I signed a 20-person client and there's still that variability that, hey, they did a layoff, they let some people go, they added people, whatever, you still have that. You still need to be making sure you're billing them for the right number of user seats, whatever the hell you're going to call it, every single month, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the further down part of that is you better make sure that all the items that are in that all-inclusive package that they know that they're supposed to be getting are actually deployed and being used. You said a great point. Hey, it's a growing client. They've added 5 or 7 new users over the last month. That's awesome, and you tapped it up. But are you breaking out your reconciliation on your back end that tells you that, oh crap, we didn't apply Duo MFA to all of those accounts? I'm still only charging that, I'm still only have 27 seats being consumed to that instead of 35.
The amount of MSPs that don't track this stuff is unreal.
It's unreal.
We have about, and we have a lot of partners. The amount of MSPs that come in not tracking time or cost of goods sold is about it's over 90%.
Oh, it is.
Wow, that's insane.
And then you've got the stuff like we see the posts on the subreddit.
Yeah.
If not weekly, every month, right? Insert vendor name here, just increase prices by 9%, by 5%, by 11% across the board. And that's natural business. That stuff happens, right? Prices go up over time. But if you didn't notice the email notification, if that went in your junk mail, if that went to one of your administrators and they didn't pay attention to it, and you're not looking at the costs on the usage reports, you're not looking at the stuff on the bills, you may think that you're still making your 80% or whatever percent margin you tacked on top of things. You're not. If you're not tracking that stuff and watching it, and you can go back for those contract ups to say, hey, this happened or whatever else, and you're not watching that, is very quickly one of your top backup vendors could be detracting all of your profit because of how they've changed their price, either changed their pricing or increased it, whether it's how they charge or whatever, right? There was one big backup vendor years ago that introduced new high watermark pricing. right? That rattled and stole profit from a ton of MSPs, not because it was a bad thing or wrong thing to do, but because the MSPs weren't paying attention to it. All that they had to do was be paying attention to it and realize that there was a change in how they're being charged for consumption to then adjust and be making their money. And if you're not watching that stuff, it can spell death for your business.
Yeah. And then there's like the flip side too, where MSPs, I see it come here and there where they're like, oh yeah, reconciliation only takes me like 5 to 10 minutes every month. It's like, yeah, right. There's just no way. And
well, honestly, it's a mirage though, because they feel they know what reconciliation is. All they're saying to you, and I just know that this is what goes on because we manage some of this stuff with our guys. They're saying, I pay my bills every month. That's what they see it as. Legit. Yeah. That's what they see it as.
Or their billing is I click all the checkbox and insert PSA name here, and I click invoice, and it pops it off to QuickBooks, and it sends my emails with the invoices out. Yeah, that's billing. That's not your reconciliation. That's not making sure that what is on all of those invoices and bills is the right lines, the right amounts for the right clients, and all of the changes that go into that. But
yeah, so this is the next point here is just the billing best practices and breaking out those revenue and cost of goods sold and the benefits in doing so. Obviously, when it comes to Synthesize billing, all we're caring about is recurring services on your recurring contracts or agreements. Now, again, we've already talked about time and materials. I, for one, coming from an MSP, it was just the bane of my existence having to tap technicians on the shoulder to enter their bloody time, yet alone to tell me when they've provisioned new agents or licenses, subscriptions, and it can compound really fast to the point where you are all of a sudden reducing your profit margins. So this is again where the significance of breaking out your cost of goods sold, your revenue line items across all your back-end contracts. Again, you don't need to show your client that information. You can do whatever you like, and you can have that comprehensive package on your invoice. And guess what? We will talk about this some more. I'll show you some examples in PSAs on how you can accommodate that. You can have that back-end administration. You can break out all your cost of goods sold. Again, having high granularity and financial reporting into your profit margins per customer, because how great would that be as an MSP month end or going into a QBR is to identify, wow, my profit margins for this particular customer are reduced significantly because it has nothing to do with my tech stack, but it has everything to do with the amount of time and materials I'm spending on this client. What's going on? Is there a negligent user? Like there's so many things that could go awry, right? So this is again, having that hyper focus into these things so you can make better business decisions. So tracking, auditing, and producing clear financial statements per customer. And that's really what this is all about. Any more there? Because again,
I mean, it's so accurate. I don't know how to spell it out more. I'm just sitting here agreeing with everything you're saying. The challenge is most MSPs aren't doing it is the problem.
Yeah. And then so this is where we're trying to fill that gap, right? So again, as long as it's a line item on your contract or agreement, we will suck that into Synthesize for you to then audit and reconcile. Now, again, there's lots of sweat equity when it comes to creating and hashing out and breaking out all of those cost of goods sold on your contracts. But once you do, I'm sure that it will be a saving grace and having that hyper focus into those particular financial reports, because again, that's where I think most MSPs, myself included, working on an MSP previously, is I didn't often see your profit margins until after the invoice cycle. And so this is where we want to address those things prior to, so you have invoice accuracy, you have accuracy across all of your vendor portals, and you're provisioning the right amount of licenses and subscriptions. So you're not over provisioning, you're not under provisioning, and it potentially being a risk factor. And again, this is where, again, sweat equity involved, but once you do it, you'll thank us later. But, PSAs, they often do have things in place in app to support these things, whether it be like a contract wizard or imports or what have you. So there's no reason why you can't do this. And once you do, this is where, sign into Synthesize billing, talk to myself and our success team. We will get you in the right track to reconcile and audit everything that makes up those comprehensive packages.
And if you look at why so many people don't do it, right? When we were looking at starting Gradient, I had conversations with so many MSPs about just this topic. And you start talking to them and they go, it was one of two things. Either, I do it every month and I can hate it because I spend 1 million hours a month. And I always go back to watching the episode of The Office where, the guy, he puts off approving expenses to the last day of the month, and he's there till like 9 p.m. that night, and is like, I just don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it, and they put it off. Right. The other part is they don't do it because it takes so much work, because it's so complicated. Because you go cross-eyed looking across all these spreadsheets and files and partner portals and contracts, and like as much as people have enhanced these PSA UIs, they're still just, it's not clean to be doing this stuff. So they don't do it because it's difficult. Well, that's why we did some of this stuff, was to simplify it, to make it easier, to take all of that pain out so that it's as simple as looking and clicking, right? But yeah, I mean, there's so many benefits to doing it. There's so many good things that can be had. And at the end of the day, it's just good business practice. Whether you have to do it, whether you should or shouldn't do it, it's just good business practice. You're in business to make money, so you better be damn sure you're making money, right? You better be sure if you sold stuff that is being billed for, that if you have an agreement, that you're living up to the agreement, that if you have an expectation for a certain amount of profitability, that you're actually hitting that level of profitability.
Yeah, and quite honestly, this brings me back to my accounting 101 days in university, where it's all of a sudden you're breaking out your revenue and cost of goods sold into your general ledger of accounts, and you think GAAP instantaneously with me, because I'm nerdy that way, that general accepted accounting practice, particularly the revenue recognition rule, allocating transactions to the performance obligations set out in your contract. So you have performance obligations and you have to adhere to those. So guess what? You have to audit all of those component add-on services. So now, we can drag on this all we want, but I really wanted to step in because I know we're short on time. We have 15 minutes left here, but I wanted to take some time to just showcase how we can accommodate this through your PSA. So I'm going to share my screen here for a second, and hopefully you can see that.
Waiting.
Where are we? Here we go. Is that good?
There it is.
See that? Yep. Okay. All right. So what you're looking at right now, and I'll go through real quick here, but for anyone that registered, we'll send out a follow-up email here, and we're going to get you hands on the knowledge base articles on how step-by-step to do this and accommodate your comprehensive packages, your service bundles, break those cost of goods sold out in your agreements and contracts, yet also not compromise your invoice template. So you can still have that comprehensive package, that one line item on your invoice, not to muddy the waters with the client and for them to penny pinch and all that stuff. Again, we want to break out everything, but not so much on the invoice. And so this is where ConnectWise Manage has a great feature in the sense that it has invoice groups. So if you don't know of invoice groups, this is where you can actually just go to your product catalog. You can go and create multiple invoice groups. Once you create your invoice group, that's where you're coming into your agreement. And if I can find that one agreement for, say, A1 car wash, we go to those additions, and this is really where you break these things out. So you might have your comprehensive package or user bundle at the very top. That's your revenue generating line item. This is the recurring contract right here, monthly. So yeah, you're charging them, in this case, potentially $200 per seat. And you want to break out all those component services, all those add-on services that make up that bundle, that package. So within ConnectWise Manage, this is where you can still break those out. Now, I'm not one to mark those on as unbillable. Anything unbillable, and you're mapping those to general ledger accounts within your accounting package, to me, it just shows that you don't actually bill for that. So instead, we just want to attribute those costs, not the price, to those general ledger accounts. So this is where you'd come in and zero out those prices. You would still attribute a cost to each and every one of those costs of goods sold. And again, you're allocating, you're mapping those to general ledger accounts within your accounting package. And of course, QuickBooks and any PSA out there, they probably already have integrations with your accounting package. So there's no rhyme or reason why you can't do this. So next up is just applying those invoice groups to all of those items. Because once you generate that invoice and you've applied those invoice groups, you can have that simplified end result where the client only sees that one line item, right? Yeah. So instead of seeing all the breakdown, that's just back end. You don't need to show them that. So this is where, again, you come in, you generate your invoice, and then thanks to those invoice groups, thankfully ConnectWise Manage makes that really easy for you as an MSP. There you have it. Your one line item, $6,000 package, and they don't need to see all the ins and outs. Now you can provide even more description within your invoice group and say exactly what's included within that package. You know, you have your antivirus, and you can white label all the various other services that you offer. Again, maybe not highlighting exactly which tools you're using, because again, that's another thing that they could nickel and dime you on. Like, why aren't you using like SentinelOne or CrowdStrike and blah, 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 list goes on. So that's as easy as it gets. Now, I don't know, tell me if, like, call me out right now. That seems pretty easy to me. And so once you break out those things in your client agreements within ConnectWise or any PSA, all of those products, all those additions are going to be sucked into Synthesize billing for you to then reconcile and audit.
Bryan, I will tell you, this is almost exactly the way that I did it back in 2009. In fact, it's why we switched from one product over to ConnectWise Manage back then. And it was because I needed all of the client agreements to be built that way. And I wanted my staff, my tech time tracking to be built in. And one of the big questions I always got was, well, how are you guys tracking your time with your techs? My techs didn't know whether time was included or not on the agreement. They tracked everything. That's the answer, is everything gets tracked. And the agreement is what handles whether the client gets billed or not. And it just came out of that. So if you, and Colin, maybe you know this, Bryan, maybe you know this. I don't have this answer because I'm not so deep into the PSA side anymore, but how many PSAs actually do this? Or do they all do this now? Or is it still limited? Because back in the day, it was, this is 2009. There was only like one that did that to that level.
But with the brilliance of Bryan Chapman here, he's found ways to configure it in almost every PSA now. And so we've got knowledge base articles that he said he'd share out that shows how we can do this across all of them. And then again, you don't have to worry about going into all these PSAs and editing every agreement and going to every addition or service item or line item and manually updating counts for them. That's why we have Synthesize. That does all of that stuff for you, but you want to break this out in the PSA so that you can keep tracking it.
Right. And again, I'm just showing you a very simplified contract. You're going to probably have several more add-on services that make up that bundle, that package. But again, this is where, like, looking at Autotask contract right now, same thing. You have your high-level revenue generating line item, and all your component services that make up that are just zeroed out price. Because again, you're just attributing cost of goods sold. So you're mapping all of those within your service catalog within Autotask to a general ledger account, and you're sucking that in once you generate that invoice. But within Autotask, we're actually leveraging rollups, or that's how I gone about this. And again, once all said and done, this is what you're ended up with. Your $2,000. Again, you can modify your template however you want. You can remove that quantity, you can remove the rate and cost, and you just have that billable amount, $2,000 a month. Boom, done. But in the back end, you still have your breakout of all your cost of goods sold. And again, I won't get into the nitty gritty because again, we're short of time here, but I will send out articles on each of the PSAs that we can effectively break out all of these cost of goods sold and then configure your invoice to have that one line item if you so choose. So there's a ton of functionality. Now it's where like PSAs, let's face it, they're highly complicated and their documentation might lack in those things, but this is where we have the billing expertise in-house right here. So if you're not already signed up with Synthesize, get started, break out your cost of goods sold. Let's get talking. Let's get things rolling because the end result is huge and enormously beneficial to you and your business. And so we can talk at length about all these other things like Kaseya, Pulseway, BMS, and whatnot. But like, for instance, BMS, it's just as simple as checking this checkbox off. Billable zero value items, no. And that way you just break out all your cost of goods sold. You don't attribute price to that. You're just allocating cost again, because it's a zero billable item. It's not going to show on the invoice template. It's that easy. So these are all things that we'll share with you. Now, Halo is another one where we're actually leveraging custom fields. And again, Halo is one of those big distributors within the PSA market, and they have a huge functionality when it comes to custom objects and whatnot. We're leveraging custom objects. We're leveraging a custom report to a report template, building that into a custom template. Like, there's lots of steps included within the whole Halo bit, but you can still accommodate those things. So again,
it's a do once thing. Like,
yeah, so do once. Yeah. Do once thing. And again, as long as it's an active contract line item or addition on your agreement or contract, we're going to suck that into Synthesize for you to audit and reconcile. And we just announced our list view too, which actually really accommodates this type of auditing and trackability. So that way you can break out all of your services per customer and say, whoop, once you synchronize all your usage and you're like, wow, there's a discrepancy here. Oh, I'm under provisioning. Oh, I'm over provisioning here. I got to make that adjustment within my PSA, but in turn, you're actually then making that adjustment within your vendor. So you have accuracy. And so that's in a nutshell what we're doing with all those PSAs. Now, before we end this webinar, I'm going to just have some takeaways. We're going to leave some room for some Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to jump into the Q&A section. Ask any question. Ask Chris or Colin anything you want. This is your time.
Anything. Oh, wow.
Anything.
Open.
Yeah,
Open.
this is AMA right now.
I got a quick just comment on that. One of the things that I see is that just most MSPs don't want to deal with this because the mountain that it potentially seems like pre-gradient. How do you get past that? Like, because I think, to me, what you guys are doing, like, I haven't seen this in a little while, Colin. It looks like what you guys are doing now has evolved so much and it looks amazing.
Yeah.
But how do you get past, how does the MSP say, okay, I need to get started? Because the big barrier to coming with you guys is that kind of scenario. And I don't have time to do my job, let alone.
Yeah.
do
So
that.
it varies on the MSP, right? Like, so there are a fair amount of MSPs that have all of their agreements all broken out already, and they're just spending 10, 20, 30 hours a month doing this, right? And so when we hook up, I mean, it takes minutes to do your setup in Synthesize. get your PSA hooked up, connected, everything else. And once you're in, like, it's there now, everything's just laid out for you beautifully. You take your CSVs that you're getting from all your different vendors and, you know, however many it is, you drag and drop that into us. The first time that you do it, you map up which clients are which clients, which services or which SKUs in your or which SKUs or which services in your PSA, and then it just runs. And then you're literally looking at a screen that says, here's how much you're set to bill. Here's how much that supplier is charging you for, how much is being consumed for it. And you either hit edit or adjust or approve, and you can select them all and approve them. And now you're not doing the million mouse clicks in the PSA. You're not doing all that stuff, and it just happens. Now, for the MSPs that don't have it broken out and they just did one line item in the contracts and they're not tracking all this stuff, you know, they've got the ability to work with Bryan and his team, and we can do more advanced onboardings where he can help and advise and counsel on that stuff and get it done. And then we've got partnerships. If it's a bigger project, we have partnerships with other consulting groups that focus and specialize on certain PSAs and on doing this to get your agreements done. That, yeah, there might be a cost for you for that, but it's not, what's the cost of your time to do it? What's the cost, like, what is your time more valuable spent on? Creating line items on all of your agreements and contracts, or out closing a new customer, or having a quality QBR that's going to sell more stuff and do more stuff and sticky that relationship, right? So, I mean, it really varies, but it doesn't have to take that long.
Yeah, I also will say, and I'm really glad you said it that way, because it's so important as you grow and scale your MSP that you're pulling yourself out of, and trust me, I know we started these companies because we like being techs. I get it.
Yeah.
But do you want to be profitable and wealthy? And wealth is not just money, wealth is time. Do you want to do that, or do you want to be a slave to the business? Because all of this, you become much more of a manager of people, like this kind of stuff, like pulling strings, than you are actually a tech in the trenches. And it's really important, speaking to every one of you guys, got multiple people here that scaled and sold their MSPs. Really important that you evolve yourself to that role, or you're never going to get out of that rat race.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Big time.
All right, well, we're going to wrap this up here real quick. Takeaways, obviously, track profitability, specific services, and identify areas of inefficiency so you're not under provisioning or over provisioning all your cost of goods sold that make up your packages. Takeaway number 2, if I can click this, there you go, audit your tech stack. So again, maintain compliance, control costs, optimize service delivery. Takeaway 3, maximize profit margins. That's why we're here. We want to stuff your wallet full of greenbacks. So produce clear and accurate financial statements so you're equipped to talk about those things during that 3-year term before your QBR. Again, we want to have greater control. And I know we didn't have any Q&As come through, but I will share those articles to everyone that is registered. They will be available on our support center. And then lastly, I just want to follow up just to wrap things up here. It's grow time. Colin, can you just can you give us your best, it's grow time? And then maybe talk about this.
Time.
Yeah. So what is this, Colin?
Yeah, so this is also, there's so many events in our industry, so many that you got to fly to do, attend, whatever. I mean, Chris's group puts on some amazing events around the US. We wanted to not just be another event. We wanted to do something that's open and accessible to anybody, that you don't have to buy a flight for, you don't have to get a hotel, you don't have to pay an attendee pass, any of that stuff, but where we can do a conference that's just stocked with true educational content that grows your business, focused on the operation of your business. This isn't one that's focused on service delivery and tuning your business. This isn't just focused on, it's around how you manage and operate your business in the back end and how you can drive that to scale and success and everything else. So we've got some stellar speakers that will be getting announced. We've got some amazing sponsors that are helping put this on so that there's no cost for you to get all this knowledge and attention and everything else. But you might just think, hey, another virtual event. I've sat on so many Zooms like this webinar. I've sat on how many things where I get to just sit and be an observer, or maybe I can do something in chat. I can tell you this is a virtual event like no other. You have full in-person almost replicated networking abilities. You can bump into your peers in the hallways, in the auditoriums, everything else. You can be sitting beside people. You can have side chats with those people while you're watching a keynote. It can all be happening in this. It's full interactivity.
All while making your own pixelated avatar, which is I think
while
is
drinking your
totally
own
nostalgic.
coffee, not some shitty hotel coffee or some fake turkey bacon. You can do all of your stuff your own, still be working tickets if you really want to. But yeah, awesome conference we're putting on. There's going to be a ton of your peers there. There's a ton of neat things that we're pulling off with it. But yeah, that's our virtual event. We have some major things with the platform we'll be announcing there. That if you're not there, you don't get that early access. You're not going to be able to see some of that stuff. And I think if you are a member of Seven Figure MSP, there are things launching at that event, things relating to stuff we talked about today that will make your life even easier. So yeah, definitely
don't tease us.
Register.
You're teasing us. All right. Yeah. Register today. Register today at legupconference.com. And lastly, to wrap things all up, I know we're 2 minutes over our time here, but thank you for sticking with us. Next series of Nerdy Birdy is featuring Ricardo Cecchini. I don't know. I probably butchered his name, but either way, he's a VP of product at Cloud Radio, and we are privileged to have him as we're exploring how bigger brains and synthesized billing can boost your bottom line on Microsoft NCE and more. So we're kind of unlocking potential additional revenue streams for you as an MSP if you're a Cloud Radio partner, which is super awesome. So now any further shout outs that you want to wrap things up with, Chris, Colin? No?
Check out
I think from my standpoint, oh, go ahead, Colin. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say, check out Seven Figure MSP. They've got a very proven philosophy, process, program. Check them out. If you're not on Synthesize, check out Synthesize. It's free to get started. Completely free. Like, it's not even just no credit card and we're going to ding you right away after, or fill your credit card to sign up and we're going to charge you in 2 weeks. Completely free. Get in, sign up, try it, engage with Bryan and the team. Start growing your business with Seven Figure MSP. Start just running a better business. That's it.
Yeah, and I think from my standpoint, think about all the things we were talking about with that all-inclusive pricing, long-term agreements, and focusing on selling the solution, which includes headline by risk these days.
Awesome. That's a good way to wrap things up. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris, and we'll talk to you all.
All right, see you guys
soon. All right, take care.
Cheers.
Bye.
See ya.